And so what I actually encourage a lot of founders to do is sell as early as possible, and not sell in the sense of like, here's like our pricing page and we have all the pricing figured out, but have people figure out like how you can get people to pay you for some functionality you're offering, or even pay you to be like a design partner. In some cases, especially if you're building like a complex platform, it might behoove you to behave almost like a service or a consulting agency at first. But the idea is that you want to be able to show that like people have a problem they're willing to pay for.
Welcome to another episode of the Supra Insider podcast. In this episode, I was joined by Phil O. Phil is the founder of Blossomer, an agency that helps early-stage B2B founders get their first 1,000 customers without hiring a sales team. Prior to starting his company, Phil was a product leader at Google, where he worked on a variety of high-impact roles like leading growth at Google Photos, leading a team responsible to increase RCS adoption, and playing a key role in building YouTube's TV advertisements platform. In our conversation, we talked about why he left his prestigious Google product role to start his business, why he decided to bootstrap versus going down the venture-backed route. We also went deep on what founders get wrong around go-to-market and distribution, and how can PMs build an intuition around how to get distribution for their products. We finalized the conversation by going deep into a few AI tools and workflows that Phil uses to get leverage and save significant time on a weekly basis. If you're a product leader thinking about starting your own agency, or you're simply a product leader that wants to become more savvy around go-to-market and distribution, this episode is for you. Enjoy.
If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app, follow us on Substack, give us a rating. It'll help us a ton and help future people discover us while also making sure you never miss an episode. Thank you.
Amazing. Phil, we're live. Great to see you, man.
Awesome. Yeah, good to see you, Marc. It's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, and I've been very excited about this conversation at so many levels. One, I think, last time we talked, you had just decided that you're going to leave your PM role at Google and start this thing, which we'll get to in a second. Also, you've been learning a ton about go-to-market. You've been helping a lot of founders there, and I just think that's one of the skill sets that are going to become more and more important in the next 5 years. So I'd love to unpack more of that with you. And then the other one is I feel like a lot of the AI tools that I use today have been because I've seen a post from you that, hey, I tried this tool and then I ended up using it and it has been amazing. So I was like, would love to pick your brain on like, what are you using these days? But anyways, maybe to start, like last time we saw each other was in New York, and I think you had just decided, hey, I'm going to leave my PM role at Google, where I believe you were leading like growth for Google Photos, which is the dream job for a lot of probably people who are in product. And you're like, hey, I'm going to start this new kind of agency called Blossomer. So yeah, walk me through like why did you make that decision?
Yeah, it was a difficult decision because I think I really enjoyed my time at Google. I think I've been really lucky at Google, especially in the sense of I always just happened to have been at the right place at the right time with the right people. So I got to work on growth, which was like a new team for Google Photos at the time. Also before that, worked on a lot of like early stage products. For example, built out like YouTube TV's advertising kind of platform. So I think in some ways it was like, I almost had a very different experience than like most Googlers, in the sense that for better or worse, like I just had extreme autonomy and I was running like teams that felt very entrepreneurial within Google. But to answer sort of your question,
maybe one question that's really curious there, that you made it sound like you were just like at the right place at the right time, but when people say that, I'm like, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm sure there's a little bit of truth to that, but I'm sure that you did something that you had the intuition of like, hey, like there's something special happening in this team. So like when you were deciding, hey, I want to move from like YouTube to Google Photos, like what were you looking for? Because I think there's something there for sure.
Yeah, I wish I could have been like, oh, I saw this with the team and then like I joined, and then because of these attributes, it'd make me probably a great investor if I had. But I think it was literally just following just like really good people. I think so much of my experience at Google has been painted by really incredible managers. And I think those were the people that had great foresight into opportunities. And sort of me, I was able to just like tag along, like, hey, I love working with this person. Let me tag along with them. I don't really care. They could be running like a KFC, like fast food chain, and I'd still love working with them. And I think a lot of it had to do with following those people who put me in the right position. But to answer your kind of original question of what led me to that decision, I think at that point in my career at Google, which was I think close to 5 or 6 years, I think I saw a lot of the natural flow of close friends and colleagues starting their own companies. And especially a lot of them were founders. So like as I was starting this sort of growth role, I was developing like my own expertise and opinions on how you do growth, but I wanted to also pick their brains on, hey, like how are you doing distribution? How are you thinking about sales? How are you thinking about marketing? So I'd reach out and ask for advice. And funny enough, they just loop me in to help as sometimes like the product guy or be an extra set of helping hands. And over time, I realized that I just really loved being around those people who were, again, taking that risk because they had just such a unapologetic drive to kind of create the outcome they wanted. And that level of kind of urgency and passion was really infectious. And so over time for me, I was moonlighting and like working for free and like stuff like that. And over time, what I found was that like this thing I was doing for fun on the side began drawing more and more of my excitement and energy. And I think by the time we started talking and I was like, Marc, I think I'm going to do it. I think at that time, like it sort of started feeling like the job I once loved became a distraction to the thing I wanted to do most. And so for me, the center of gravity was how do I work with more great people like that? And then that started the journey of like, okay, like how do I figure out how to like turn this into a business where I get to do that? So that was the origins of it.
Yeah, and I'm curious because it sounds like you had a lot of friends either inside of Google or probably like from college. It sounds like a lot of them were like VC-backed companies.
Yeah.
And you're like, I think one is it's cool you're doing that. I love that you took the leap. And then two is like, hey, I want to help you. I'm curious, like, at any point did you consider, hey, maybe I also want to do that, start like my own like venture-backed company, or were you like pretty set that, hey, I found this thing that I love and I just want to make it work no matter what, and I'll chase that?
I think it was the latter. Like, I think part of it too was, and maybe this is me naturally being a little bit too risk adverse. I don't think I ever really viewed myself as a founder. Like the thought of becoming Mark Zuckerberg running like $1 trillion empire never seemed that appealing for me. But what I did love was the sort of like entrepreneurial owning your own business aspect of it that I found really appealing. I think, yeah, Mark, you and I met because of Charlie, who is my kind of executive management coach. And during one of these sessions, I think we just did this exercise where I was like, I think we just talked about painting their perfect life. And it was like something even mundane, but in hindsight profound, where I realized like, I'd be like really happy running my own coffee shop or like doing something like that. But it's like, I realized that what drove me was one, like working with great people, feeling like I make a difference in their lives. And two, I think creating something that was like my own. And the scale of it, I realized didn't really matter very much for me. I'm not like completely averse to starting my own company or like VC backed startup, but yeah, I realized even though I was working at Google and was experiencing like impact at a large scale, that wasn't ultimately what was driving me. I think it was more pursuing this, hey, how do I make every day exciting and fulfilling and work with people I'm really excited to work with?
Yeah, it's funny. I think about my own journey in a very similar way.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I value is the autonomy to be able to do what I want, feeling like, hey, I'm building this thing, I'm growing it. And I'm just, there's very clear correlation between the inputs and outputs that I put in. Yeah. And then the same thing of like just being surrounded by awesome people that I'm like learning.
And what I realized too is, I think having seen a lot of friends go through this journey, is being a startup founder, it is really exciting in the sense of you have this mental model of being really autonomous. And yes, you do have a lot of, you are the sort of guide or the captain of the ship you're rowing. your VCs can quickly also become major constraints on that autonomy too. And for better or worse, even regardless who the VC is, taking VC money means there is a path to getting to a certain kind of financial exit, which can preclude you from pursuing like a different, potentially slower path, for better or worse. I think having seen enough friends not necessarily fall into that trap, but like decide that they're running that treadmill without fully realizing the extent of how fast they need to run, I think made me a little cognizant of that as well.
Yeah, like the optionality is definitely limited. Same with a co-founder too. Like
Right.
even though like you can find a co-founder you're very aligned with, that also, you have someone else that you have to always be aligned when it comes to expectations, when it comes to outcomes. So totally agree. And yeah, so it sounds like you're doing this on the side. You were getting a lot of energy out of it. And then at what point were you like, I think this can become a business and I can go out there and sell it? Walk me through that, because I think that's sometimes like the hardest part, right? Especially like when you're doing free work and you're still like in this novelist place where, I'm helping them with growth, but I'm also learning about distribution, which is necessarily not my expertise yet. So I'm curious, how do you go how do you transition from I'm doing this free work to now I want to start charging people for my help?
Yeah, I think I put on like my product management mindset of like, I kind of treated it as like a time boxed experiment. So once I made the decision, it was, okay, let me save up enough runway where I could do this for X number of months and see, okay, if I could hit this amount by this date, then I think this could be self-sustaining. And if not, I will go back to Google or find another job. And thankfully, I think by then I had a pretty clear conviction on this hypothesis that early stage founders just really needed help with distribution. And for me, the experiment was, I knew the demand was there. My job now is to figure out like, what is the form factor I can create to provide that help in a way that aligns with kind of like my personal goals in business. And for me, I was pretty lucky where I was able to kind of know for certain this could be a really viable business within even a month or two of making the leap. And then it was a game of like, how do I grow? How do I make this more valuable, etc. So
yeah. So is it still just you right now in the business, or do you have some help for different things?
Yeah, it's primarily me. And then on occasion, I'll loop in like other freelancers or like people in my network to kind of help with specific tasks. But yeah, I think to the point about like hiring, I think I'm on this journey now. I think the next stage of kind of Blossom and growing will be figuring out how do we make our service delivery and the things we do more structured and repeatable. On one hand, it's really great where I meet like a really diverse set of founders who, even though they have the similar needs, like how you would go about executing and delivering something to them will be kind of like pretty meaningfully different. For example, I may work with a AI developer tool startup, and then you may be working with like an enterprise automation startup or a procurement analytics startup, and their go-to-markets are different, how they prospect and find leads are different, and ultimately what they need in terms of how you execute those campaigns will be different as well. And right now it's all like me making kind of like decisions, working with them on the fly. And in order to support more businesses more efficiently, I think it's finding what parts of that service delivery is repeatable. And I think for me, until then, until I crack that code of figuring out either like niching down very specifically or making parts of the service delivery kind of like more productized or standardized, I think it makes the most sense right now for me to kind of still take on a lot of the solo work and loop in folks as needed. But this is like the P0 question I've been thinking about a lot these last couple of months.
Because I'm sure that's like kind of the scaling bottleneck right now. Like you can increase prices, but at some point you're going to hit that roof. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, I think maybe what would be helpful here is, I think the word distribution has been thrown around a lot lately,
Yeah.
especially in regards of, hey, like AI is commoditizing the speed of building, and then it's really important for people to, the products that are going to win are the ones that are going to figure out how to do distribution at scale and really get in the hands of customers. And you just said, hey, like what I help with people is help them with figure out distribution. So maybe let's unpack that. What does that mean to help a founder like figure out distribution?
Yeah. This is diving into kind of like my own personal philosophy about like sales and marketing too. It's like, in my mind, like I think where I see a lot of stuff going is we used to have these very discrete sort of functions. There was the marketing folks who do quote unquote marketing. There are sales folks who do cold calling, email, quote unquote sales. And then we had this like big hype around like growth teams and product led growth. And at least for like early stage startups or like the people I'm working with, I think though AI has enabled or AI has torn down the kind of boundaries between those functions. And even before AI, I think you were seeing product managers doing a lot of marketing folks doing a lot of sales folks doing a lot of marketing, product managers writing content as forms of organic marketing.
And sometimes it's just one founder doing it all, right?
And I think it's coming from an underlying place, and it's something I preach to, or it's like the philosophy I talk to with the founders we work with, which is whether it's marketing, like the cold email you're sending, or even like your product experience, like those are touch points at a very specific point in time for your customer or your user. And underlying that is a philosophy and a message and a positioning that you are conveying to those users. So it's like you need to deliver the right message at the right place at the right time for the right user, which means that you need to have that level of coordination and consistency in order for that message to kind of land and get users to do the things that, or to deliver the most value to those users. And so if that's the underlying philosophy, it's like the old way of doing it was like a lot of these things were siloed just because you didn't have the bandwidth or the expertise to execute all of these different functions at once. And because of that, you would get like message that was like really inconsistent. Like one of the things we look at first is, hey, like we're sending this email campaign or we're launching this marketing ad that says this value proposition. Does that even line up with the landing page when users get there? And does the messaging from your onboarding experience even match up with your landing page? So it's like you see these silos there. And what AI has enabled is faster information retrieval. You could learn a lot of these things a lot faster because of AI. There's a lot of like automation to help make the kind of handoff of things a lot faster. And obviously with more productivity, you can have one person that can be the holy grail of that messaging and philosophy. And because of AI, it enables them to actually execute in a coordinated manner. And I see a lot of like what we do as Blossomer, what I help founders do is take that kind of philosophy they have about their message and positioning, test it, develop it, and then make sure it's coordinated across all of these different touch points.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like that is a lot on the marketing side. What about on the sales side? Is that, and I'm guessing that also changes. For example, if it's like B2B, like super like high touch, do you still work with some of those people, or like how do you?
Yeah, I think if anything, we've actually pivoted to focus a lot more on outbound, like cold email and LinkedIn specifically. One, because I think from an early stage founder's perspective, like those are the most like cost effective sort of formats. Like it doesn't make sense when you're still figuring out your messaging and positioning to spend like tens of thousands of dollars on advertising, right? But using cold email campaigns, using LinkedIn, talking to customers, going through a sales cycle, you learn a lot about how to message and position your product. And with those learnings, you could then apply that to your marketing, to your product roadmap, to all these different touch points we talked about. So
yeah, because I'm almost thinking, especially in the Supra community, there's a bunch of people that are like on this side building apps with Cursor or Bold or Lovable. And I think the first step that a lot of times they have is, hey, before I make this into my full-time thing, I probably need to get it in customers' hands, maybe get a couple of sales. And here's like what would be your recommendation for the first step that someone should take? Is it like maybe do those cold outbounds a little bit, try to get into the phone with a couple of customers, get feedback, and then kind of as you get more traction, maybe sign the first couple of customers, build your a little bit more of like your marketing, even like landing page or things like that. Like, how do you think about it? Yeah, especially in this day and age of AI.
And I think especially like it's so you could spin up a landing page so quickly to go from working prototype to like, hey, this looks like a legit thing and it's pretty professional because of a landing page. Like it's like faster than ever. And so what I actually encourage a lot of founders to do is sell as early as possible, and not sell in the sense of like, here's like our pricing page and we have all the pricing figured out, but have people figure out like how you can get people to pay you for some functionality you're offering, or even pay you to be like a design partner. In some cases, especially if you're building like a complex platform, it might behoove you to behave almost like a service or a consulting agency at first. But the idea is that you want to be able to show that like people have a problem they're willing to pay for. And in order to do that, you should do things like tap your network. You should send cold emails. Like I always tell founders, like before working with me and setting up like systems, you should manually go and just try sending 5 emails a day on your own, like handwriting them by hand before even using AI. And so it's like building that philosophy of, yeah, obviously you don't want to build in isolation. You also don't really get a real sense of how painful or how much demand there is for your product or your company until you get signal on how much people are willing to pay for it. And I think that's one of the first things I try to have them do. So it's regardless of what you're doing, figure out the most cost-effective way to solicit money from your customers, I guess is a more concise way of saying what I was just rambling about.
Nice. And then it sounds like once you've maybe gotten 3 or 4 of those, I'm sure it depends on like the ACV of the deal, but then you can start to think, okay, maybe there's something here. Let's start to try these different channels and maybe automate a little bit of it.
And it's very often that like your first batch of customers, those early adopters, are not going to be the ones who are like your ideal customers, right? Like I would say almost every startup I've worked with, they'll start off with a handful of design partners. And those design partners were really important for developing the capabilities and giving them like a deeper sense of what the market is and what process they're improving, et cetera. But once we find success, like once we've built like a scalable solution, the actual customers that they start getting early signs of product market fit are actually pretty meaningfully different than those early adopter customers. But again, they never would have discovered that market had they not learned the kind of pros and cons of working with those initial early adopters, as well as what they found value and what's not value. They sort of become like a really important baseline for you that you could then systematically build from and test other value propositions.
Yeah, which in a way it sounds like it's like a similar journey to the one you're going with, right? Like you probably started more wider funnel, had a few people you started working with, and then eventually you're like, hey, like this is the type of people that I think get the most value out of Blossomer.
Yeah, exactly.
And we touched a little bit of those, but I'm curious, like, what are some common mistakes that you see founders make when it comes to go to market? I think you mentioned, hey, like maybe spending too much time building before selling is one. And I think another one that implicitly you mentioned there was maybe not firing those pilot or partners once you move to a different section, or like at least parting ways in a clean way. Just continue to build with for 2 personas. Like, but what are the things that come to mind that you see over and over again with clients you work with?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. I think the first, which I think most founders are aware of, is I don't think they're applying the same level of kind of consistency and analytical rigor to their outbound as they would say their product or their experiments. Like I very much believe outbound should take a very similar experiment driven approach, testing, reflecting, iterating. And obviously, unless you have like a $20,000 or $30,000, like 30,000 person mailing list, like you're not going to get quote unquote statistical significance. But even after sending 100, 200 emails and A/B testing them properly and having customer conversations, you get pretty high conviction on the optimal combination of who to target and how to message folks. So that's number one. The second one, I think, is...
by the way, for that, like how like to get tactical here, like how do you recommend people just using like a spreadsheet to track, hey, here are the different emails that I've used, open rates, replies, kind of conversions to meetings? Is that how you think about it? Or and is it also, it sounds like there's like the rigor of kind of tracking things, measure them and
Yeah.
reflecting. There's also maybe the rigor of like consistency too. Is that also another good way to think about it?
Yeah, I think your basic sort of like outreach tool. I think most folks nowadays are using like Apollo. You could use Lemlist. There's a lot of kind of quote unquote like email outreach tools, even ones that like are focused specifically on LinkedIn, like HeyReach. I think it's like making a habit of checking, open rates, reply rates consistently, and not just like tweaking things on the fly as you feel like it, but being like, okay, 100, 200 emails, this subject line, emphasize this value prop. This is the open rate. Okay, now I'm going to tweak this. Okay, looks like the last 3 subjects didn't really work. Maybe we change the targeting, but it's like being really rigorous. And a lot of what we help with is also documenting like what we've tried and what we've learned. What you would do, like running a product experiment, right? But treating each of those variables as like a slight tweak. And so I think most folks aren't applying that level of consistency, because you need a good steady throughput of sending 100 every week or even more. And 2, they're not applying the same discipline and analytical rigor. So that's really important. And then the third is kind of like, again, I think more related to the impact of AI and stuff. I think especially, and this is true, especially with email and LinkedIn outreach, like there's so much emphasis put on like personalizing the email and making it seem like really bespoke. And I think there's a whole industry of kind of AI to make your AI generate email seem less like AI. And what I found is that relevance matters so much more than personalization. So when we build prospecting systems, which is, I think, what we're particularly good at, we focus a lot less on scraping your profile and then writing an email that's like, hey, I saw you follow this person, or I saw you post on LinkedIn recently. If anything, I feel like that stuff isn't that effective. And because people know that you can get that stuff with AI, it screams that it's coming from AI, and it's like a little cringy, like you cross that uncanny valley. What matters a lot more is relevance. Like it could be the most like generic templated email ever, but if you happen to hit that person that's, I've actually been thinking about this problem a lot, or like, my team has this problem, they will open and read your email and then click through and try to learn more. And so I think where outreach and prospecting gets won or lost is really about your ability to detect buying signals. Like what are proxies for showing that this team has like a need for your product right now? And there's some generic ones that tend to work pretty well, like, hey, maybe they have a job opening related to a use case that your product can solve. Maybe if you're a product that is like trying to streamline things or handle complexity, recent rounds of funding or growth hiring works too. But then there's like even more sort of like niche things you could do as well. Like depending on we've done things where we've scraped Instagram kind of accounts and saw that certain posts from certain brands indicated a need for a certain product. Or we would go in and dive into communities and saw that like, hey, like whenever this sort of company gets a lot of activity on the subreddit and they tend to be unhappy, we have this cohort of users that, or this like demographic profile of users that tend to respond really well to this particular kind of news and pain point. So it's like, I always love, this is like the fun part of the job. We're kind of always on this journey of figuring out like, how do we figure out where the demand is and how do we scalably sort of acquire and act on it?
Yeah, no, a lot of the things you said resonate. I do some cold outbound for Supra, and I've had the exact same learnings. I think there has to be a minimum of personalization, so people open it and be like, hey, this is for me. But if I find like a lot of times people don't like reply, like, hey, like I replied because I feel like you really did the research on me. Like, cool, that seems a little bit table stakes. But hey, like I like the pain points that you just described in your email resonated so much that I want to reply. And I totally agree.
Think you touched on the sub point too, which is like, I think the differentiator now is because AI makes outreach so easy in terms of personalization and scale, is that I think people still want to feel like they're being treated like a human being. And so there is a level of doing your homework and trying to genuinely be helpful that I think makes outreach really impactful. So I think how you win isn't the like, hey, Mark, like I saw you posted this last week. Oh, by the way, weird tangent, we're selling this thing to you. It's not that, but it's showing that, hey, Mark, I read your post and this is how it personally resonated with me. I really want to be helpful because from this post, I gleaned that you might be going through this particular use case or situation. And I'd love for you to take a look at this because I think it could genuinely be helpful. Like even like that tone and posture for that second kind of email makes you seem like so much more helpful and authentic.
Yeah, and I think that's why also like LinkedIn social selling is also very powerful. And I think there's like, I almost kind of see like two tracks. I see the track of, okay, like building your audience, right? Like building trust that way, being just really helpful, just giving a lot of stuff for free. But then there's also the, before you talk to someone, just engage a little bit with them, right? Like maybe like their post, comment, just almost kind of be that person that it's not like, oh, I know this person or this person showed up. Yeah. Do you recommend LinkedIn for the founders you work with? Like what are your thoughts on using?
Yeah, definitely. I think you really need a combination of LinkedIn, email, and even like content. Because like you should think of email as like a free ad impression. So think of even I worked on YouTube ads and like Google ads prior. So it's like even our best like direct response advertisements are lower than like 5% click-through rate. To get someone to convert, I think it's like really pretty much impossible to expect like, hey, you've never met me before. You got an email. It took you 15 seconds to read. Please click on this and let me convert you. Like really email is, you can treat email or your first LinkedIn outreach as like the initial touch point. And you're not going to convert them off the bat. Your job is to really to get them to trust you as like a human being, to get them interested, and then be top of mind enough where, oh, when I have this problem, I'll look into this some more because this person mentioned this. And people are forgetful, right? They're going to forget who you are 2 or 3 days later, which is how you layer maybe another email, maybe LinkedIn content. And like over time, and depending on the product, that the life cycle might be longer, over time, they learn about you more, they learn more about philosophy, they trust you more. And when that pain really becomes something they're actively thinking about, they'll go and solicit your services or your product. Like it's really rare. It's really hard to find, hey, like this is the right person that has a need right now. And I just happened to email them like the moment they were thinking about it. It almost never happens that way. So you really do need to think of like the long game and plan your outreach and content accordingly.
I think one of the scariest things for me when I started as a founder was the follow-ups. Like I just felt, ooh, like this person's going to hate me. Like I already told him what he wanted, like now I'm going to follow up. I'm sure there's a balance, but yeah. And I think that was also like an interesting lesson for me in product too, especially when you're releasing a product. Like I think thinking about, hey, what is the multi-channel distribution for that new feature or for that new product? Because I think, as you said, the fact that you catch that person at the right time, at the right moment in their day, in their life is just so tricky. So you do have to hit them multiple times and then hope that one of them is the right time or that the right notification surfaces at the right time. But also while finding that balance of like, hey, I'm not just being annoying and there's maybe some value that I'm delivering in every interaction that we have, which I think is the tricky part.
And I think, because I think I'm like that too as well, with a natural people pleaser. And you meet a lot of founders with the same like, oh, like do I one, they don't want to send the first email, and then they for sure don't want to send the second email after no replying. And like, oh, we have to follow up with them on LinkedIn. I think what helps with that too is having a genuine belief that you are reaching out because you really think you can help them. And I think one, I think that makes, again, what we talked about, it makes your outreach feel a lot more authentic and it stands out because it's a lot more genuine. But two, it eases that anxiety, right? I would feel really bad if I'm like, hey, Mark, give me your money like 3 or 4 times. But if it's like, hey, Mark, I just want to help. You let me know if I can. Or it's like, hey, Mark, like I know you're super busy, but again, like help is still here if you need it. No problem. If not, just let me know. That's, I think psychologically a lot easier.
Yeah, almost like giving people like a way out, but knowing, hey, like I'm ready to help out whenever you are. Yeah, it's almost like similar for a lot of things in life too. Job, when you're looking for a job, you're like, hey, I really think that I can help the company in this thing because I have this experience, or even
Yeah.
dating sometimes in a way too.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe one thing that I'd love to touch with you on is back to, I feel like, the distribution becoming so important and being top of mind for everyone. And I'm sure there's
Yeah.
like a few product leaders that are listening now, be like, okay, I've definitely heard it from multiple sources that I need to get better at this. What are some things that for someone that maybe hasn't done distribution work in the past, like that you can start doing today to learn, to get your hands dirty, so you can start build that intuition of what works, what doesn't?
Oh man, it's not gonna be like the like people are gonna roll their eyes at this advice, but it's like I think you really have to like do it and try it, right? Like depending on your product, a distribution method is going to work or it's not going to work. It might be organic content, it might be outbound sales, it might be LinkedIn versus email, or it might be like something like product led. You're not gonna know until you test. And I think I would say the best thing you could do is, yes, spend some time reading and brushing up on best practices, but don't let your quote unquote lack of knowledge cause you to procrastinate and try. And that's, I think, really where a lot of the education comes from. Like, I think when I first started, like, I'm kind of like the cold outbound guy. Like, when I was moonlighting as a founder, or sorry, when I was moonlighting helping founders as a PM, I hadn't sent a single cold email in my life. But for me, it was like important to feel like, okay, let me get some baseline knowledge. And I think there's a lot of folks on LinkedIn and there's a lot of kind of material you can even Google, ChatGPT, you can ask now.
Yeah.
To kind of get up to speed on best practice, learn about things like inbox warming, you learn about the latest tools. But until you actually go and do it and send your first campaign, I think you don't really get it to the extent that you need to. And I think, and I'm like this too, like everyone is sort of on the lookout for a silver bullet, or like, here's the trick that's like the easy to use trick that's going to work. But I think the reality is like you just have to try stuff. And even sometimes best practice won't necessarily work for your context. But again, with what we talked about, like the consistency and the reflection and the willingness to iterate and improve, you'll ultimately get there. But I think it's just being honest and disciplined with whatever kind of channel you're choosing.
I think something that's super useful too is like finding someone who's like maybe 2 steps ahead that has done it a while. And I think like an hour and a half or 2 hours with that person will save you like weeks and weeks of work. Because they've learned all those lessons that you're probably going to learn in the first couple of months. You'll still make some of the same mistakes, but I think it really accelerates that learning. Yeah. And I think that's very applicable for people that are maybe building their own, they have a side product on the side that are trying to sell. But I'm curious, do you think there's anything people can do if like be like, hey, like I actually don't really want to build a product on the side, but I wonder if I can learn some of those skills inside of my company? Is there something about maybe tagging along with marketing or sales that you think can be useful here?
Oh yeah, I think like this is a bit of a tangent, but also applicable. When I was working on the advertising side for YouTube TV and we're building the platform, I would say one of the best things I did was go on this trip and tag along with all the sales calls. And one, as a PM, you appreciate how not chaotic, but like you appreciate a lot of the nuances and the people things that go into sales. You appreciate just like how complex that process can be. And one, I think it makes you a better product builder, right? Because then you're not just building this feature in isolation, or you're not just like, oh my God, like the salesperson's telling me to build this, but you understand the context and the why behind why that's on the roadmap and why that's important. So I think one, it makes you a really strong product builder. And two, it's like, yeah, I would totally recommend anyone who's ultimately between you and the end user or the customer using your product, anyone on your team that touches the execution of delivering that to end user, I think is really valuable to talk to. Because it's very rare where you're the one kind of like ideating, building, and then like literally handing it to the person. And you want to understand every part of that touch point. And what I've seen is that you'll often be like really surprised that there's certain things that either get lost in translation or inefficient, or you could better tailor like the creation of your product for. So yeah, would highly recommend you talk to like a bunch of cross-functional folks for sure.
Yeah, I think the other thing that comes to mind as you were talking is back to the point that you've made, right? Of sometimes the smartest thing to do is to sell and they're built. And I think that sometimes is very hard to do inside of a company. And for sometimes maybe it's not a standalone product, but also sometimes too, that's just not how the product process is baked, right? Like you do quote unquote user research, but you're not asking anyone to be like, hey, would you pay 10 grand for this for your team or whatever? So I'm curious, do you think there's an opportunity for teams to do more of that in bigger companies where maybe that's just PMs are not expected to do sales or similar? And if not, like what is a good proxy for that kind of gives you like a similar signal?
Yeah, it's hard. And like I've definitely been guilty of that as well. Like Google, obviously big company, so many resources, and you have like really excellent user research folks or marketing folks who talk to users, and you could like tag along and sometimes participate and ask questions yourselves. And so I guess like one, I would say even in that sort of like environment, it was always one of these things where I was super busy. We're trying to hit deadlines at a presentation or something. And I'm like, oh man, I totally forgot I agreed to like this half day user research session. And you reluctantly go. And then, but like almost always, like you are just really happy that you went and got to ask a question or even hear a user because you end up learning something new. And the reason I bring that up is that depending on your company, given process, given kind of the size, you may or may not be able to like talk to users directly or efficiently. But getting as close as you can to being able to do that as consistently as possible, I realized has always been beneficial. And it's almost like eating your vegetables. Like you hate to do it, and you always think there's something easier or more urgent to prioritize. But I always, looking back, I feel like my biggest like high leverage moments have been, oh, I remember these users like saying this, and I had this preconception of like how this product needs to be built or how we solve this problem, and it totally changed that, and it ended up making the end result a lot better. And it's one of these things where you'll forget when you're busy, but you sometimes have to remind yourself of doing it. So it's like, yeah, I think it's unrealistic for me to tell everyone that, hey, go out there and email users and talk to them, because in a lot of, especially if you're working at a bigger company, there's a lot of process that gets in the way of that. But if you can, great. And if you can't, try to get as close to that as possible. I have some friends who work at companies that are like 200 to 300 now, where they always talk about how they love that like part of their onboarding experience was taking customer support calls. Or I know in the case of DoorDash, they had them actually do the actual deliveries. In Uber, they actually have them drive for Ubers. They always talk about how those were like really seminal experiences. And even at the sort of like large scale, like you might not be able to do that like every day, but it's like figuring out how within the structures of how companies work, you could deliver as high fidelity of that experience as possible. And I've also seen some like really great PMs at Google sort of like evangelize having more PMs do some of that work more often as well. So yeah, something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, it's a learning for me has been, for some reason, I always thought about sales as this car salesman type of a little bit schemy. And I think the more I learned about it, I think the more I wished that I did it sooner. Because it's such a powerful skill for everything in life, like recruiting, even product, right? I know they like what sales is like, hey, let me understand your problems and then figure out if the thing that I have will solve it and convince you that's the right thing for you.
And sort of like I just so I don't make this all seem like super abstract, like translating to what I do for my business. Obviously, you have some founders who are like very excited and they sign with you, and then you get to know them and you learn why you're valuable to them. But some of my most valuable conversations have been when we did the call, we talked about our process, and they ultimately decide to go in another direction. And in the event where they don't straight up ghost me, which fortunately is like pretty rare, those conversations, like, again, like with the posture being helpful, it's like, hey, like, I don't want to sell you. Obviously, it's not a good fit. I want to work more with really fantastic founders like you. In order to do that, there's clearly something that I could improve, either in terms of price, value, etc. Can you do me the honor of like just walking me through your thought process of what you decide to do? And do you have any advice for me and our company on how we could kind of make this more appealing to someone like you? And those have been some of the most valuable things where I had some founders like, yeah, like I saw on your landing page, this wasn't really clear. Or like, oh, I think you might be too expensive on this end. Or yeah, you talked a lot about this stuff here, but like I really just needed this and I could get this a lot cheaper elsewhere. Like I call they call them win-loss interviews in sales.
Yeah.
And doing them, I think, is really valuable. And they kind of hurt the ego because I have to like remind myself I lost this deal, but you learn so much from them.
Yeah. Do you schedule these conversations as they're telling you no, or basically like they'll email you, hey, I'm not interested, and then you'll ask for the next call, basically?
Yeah, or I try to make it like as easy as possible for them. Hey, feel free to just fill out this form or respond this email. If you're up for it, I would also just love to schedule a quick call if you're free. I've thought about like maybe even incentivizing it of like, oh, let me send you like a $50 Amazon gift card because I do think it's like that valuable. So I've kind of tried all of those things.
And how do you think about paying more attention to the people that said yes to you and like they clearly saw something there that was very valuable versus focusing on people that maybe did not see that, but maybe there was a gap? Like, how do you decide who to listen to? Because I think sometimes that can be tricky. I forgot where I saw it, but I remember reading somewhere, hey, like the best way to fix churn is not to go back to people that churn and be like, hey, like, why did you churn? Is more of like, for the people that decided to stay, like, why did you decide to stay? What makes my product so valuable? So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it a little bit, which is, again, like whatever I just did for clients that I've lost, like clients that signed, like we do the same thing. And it's usually one of our first meeting, which is like why you signed. And again, it's like with the interviews for folks that you lost to, I think that's trying to identify deficiencies, like assuming this is like someone I want to acquire, what's a feature or service or something that was missing that I can evaluate whether to include to get more clients like that. And then when you talk to someone who just signed with you, they signed with you for a reason. And for me, it's a lot of figuring out like, there's a lot of inertia with trusting someone or buying a product or buying a service. What pushed you over the edge? What do you feel is valuable? What does success look like for you? And I have two goals there when I talk to clients I recently signed. One is, again, talking about what does success look like for you? So that's more of the like, you signed with me. How do I make sure this is a slam dunk for you? And then the second is much more about the kind of like messaging and service delivery, which is what part of this offering really encapsulated you? And assuming I want to get more clients like you, what part of this should I build and expand on? So it's one set of interviews that you lost is looking at your deficiencies. The other one is looking at what you could like highlight or augment or double down on. And then obviously both sides will give you like the pros and cons of your service. And I think that's the sort of like wiggle room of like, oh, you have an existing client that's complaining that they need more of this versus like you have a client that you lost and they're like, oh, but by the way, I like this part of your service. I think you should keep that. That part takes a little more nuance and like more gray. But if you're really deliberate about what information you're trying to glean from whom and for what purpose, I think that's like the solution, at least for my business.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It makes me want to do that more for Supra, which I don't do enough of. And I think there's also the other valuable thing too of like, maybe even 4 months after, that's a great time to be like, hey, like you sign up for these reasons. Now that we've been working together for X amount of time, what is the reason that keeps you with me and keeps you keeps us working together? I think you also learn a lot of maybe there's something that you do that is very unique, very special. That maybe you didn't know it was special, but once you hear it maybe 2 or 3 times, I think there's definitely something there too.
Yeah. And I think a great question I asked was like, hey, like throughout this whole process or experience, like what surprised you? And it's either good or bad. Because what that shows is they had this mental model of how this works going in. And then something happened and then they had this new mental model. And so you get to see, oh, for folks like this, I'm seeing patterns with their expectations and their mental model of something. And then, oh, what exactly did I do to create this new mental model? And is it the mental model I actually want them to have? And I think seeing that evolution, I think is really important as well.
Makes sense. What tools are you using to capture that? Is it just you have a Notion doc with a table with all the notes, or like how are you keeping track of that?
Yeah, I have a Notion doc of all the notes. Maybe this gets into like our conversation about AI tools, but you upload it to like Notebook LM or Chat GPT. Like I create a custom GPT that literally just keeps track of here are all the transcripts of like calls I've had with kind of folks' permission, obviously. Like, help me identify patterns. What do they seem to really lean in on? What are the common questions they ask? And I sort of use that to build like a centralized kind of, here's how we talk about Blossomer document. And that translates to our landing page. That translates to how I talk to prospective clients, translates to like the sales and marketing collateral that we produce.
Very cool. So it sounds like you have a system that if someone gives you permission to put their recording, you'll move it there, and then you're constantly maybe asking the same question, be like, hey, how can we change the way we do our sales call, or any changes we should make to our positioning? And it sounds like maybe like an arbitrary time, like maybe like once a month or maybe every 2 weeks, you'll kind of like review it and check, be like, hey, here.
And where that bot gets like really helpful too is like, it has a history of a lot of the sales calls and transcripts. And after a call, you're talking to the client, you're like, yeah, like I either felt really good about this or I didn't feel that good. Like they asked like this question, hey, ChatGPT, does this jive with kind of like what we've been seeing recently? Where does this fit into your AI mental model of whether we're articulating our services and what we do clearly? And it's generally pretty good at like, oh, like this seems to align with some of what these founders have said historically. Like this part always seems to be unclear when you talk about this. And those are like blind spots that I think you would either forget or just not really see had you not had that assistance.
Yeah, I think this is also very applicable for PMs doing user research. Like they could probably set up like a very similar custom GPT for the same purpose. Yeah, I'm now going deep into the AI space. Like, what are some tools that you'd be very upset if I took away from you tomorrow?
Oh man, I also have a classic kind of like shiny object syndrome. So I feel like I'm always signing up for free trials or paying. So it's like, I think I have 3 different buckets for me in terms of AI tools. There's obviously like the general purpose like chatbots. Then there's I think very workflow specific tools depending on the use case. And then there's obviously like the sales and prospecting tech that I use for myself and my clients. I'll start with the general purpose ones because we've been talking about it. I use all of them. Grok I haven't used as much, but Claude, like anything with writing or I think coding or even remotely technical, I've found it to be, I think that seems to be consistent with a lot of what I've heard. And I think folks that say like you've had on the podcast as well. Again, I mentioned like every person I work with, I create like custom GPTs with the kind of goal of making sure that there's an easy way to retrieve context. And I think Google Notebook is particularly really strong at this in terms of finding you a specific kind of like, hey, like when did they say this or this specific fact? ChatGPT is a little better at like, less good at the information finding needle in the haystack retrieval, but really good at the like, okay, I have this context of things. Here's a somewhat intelligent person that can give me or summarize this context and maybe point out blind spots. Gemini, I haven't really used besides like using their API for specific kind of automations I built because I think like some of their new models are really cost effective at this point. So yeah, those are the general purpose ones. I could dig into the workflow specific ones because there's a lot, but like, is there anything about the like general purpose chat tools that you want to touch on?
Yes, it sounds like from what I'm hearing is like when you onboard a new customer, you'll probably like create both like a custom GPT and then like a notebook LLM. That kind of becomes like where you keep all the context. And it seems like the notebook LLM is more around finding, hey, like I want to go back, be like, they said something like this. I want to double click on it. When did they say it? The custom GPT is more around, it's almost like a co-founder that's helping you find those blind spots. So that makes sense. Do you give your customers access to that custom GPT or is that just for you and for your use?
I do if they need it. Most of the time, I think, because a lot of folks I work with are technical, like they already have their own. And they're like, like my thing's also pretty good. And then I'm like, can I have access to it, to your thing? So sometimes that works. I will say like one I didn't mention was like, I also have Claude projects for helping me write emails and some of the content I produce. Again, it's like a similar idea. It's like you upload a history of like stuff you sent or stuff you've written so that it understands like your tone and your voice and how you speak. And what I found to be really helpful actually with both Claude and GPT is less the like, hey, like I have an idea about this, help me write it. But I really have a prompt that says, hey, before you generate this post or generate this email, ask me like really pointed questions. Like it'll ask me things like, hey, what's the point of this email? What are you trying to accomplish with this? And I'll literally tell, if I'm writing like content, for example, I literally have it behave like an editor where, hey, like you mentioned this, but they'll steel man and be like, but you seem to contradict yourself here. What have you thought about this? And it's like a partner to kind of refine your thinking and uncover blind spots. And I'll do all that before having them generate a draft and then redo the draft on my own, do it again, and then revise the draft and then publish. And I feel like that makes one, the content in the email sound a lot more human. And two, I think it's like having an annoying kind of like intern kind of ask you like, oh, like you said this, why? And it kind of forces you to be much more clear and concise.
Yeah. The other thing that I've noticed too when I do that is it also forces the model to think more, right? Like, it's like they have to think a little bit more. They have to take the extra steps. It's almost when you use like any of the prototyping tools like Lovable or even like a lot of times, I think like a lot of the power users, what I've learned from them is like, hey, like the first thing they say is don't code, just share the plan with me. And then code. And even if you don't modify the plan, just the fact that they had to think to build a plan, it just probably thought about something that maybe they would have missed in the first
and keeping the task like really focused. I guess if you give it a laundry list of things or you give it something without kind of constraints and boundaries, it goes off in a ton of different directions. But you get some really powerful results when you can like just focus it in on one specific thing.
Yeah, and I think that's why I love Claude projects, because like it like kind of really forces you to, okay, I'm entering this domain or this other domain. Because LinkedIn Marc is very different than email Marc. So totally. Maybe let's talk about the second bucket. What was the second bucket? Was it like the workflows?
Yeah, workflow specific stuff. So it's like depending on individual kind of like admin tasks, right? I don't know. Everyone has their favorite like transcriber. Like I love Granola. Because I found myself like typing into Apple Notes just random mess of things, and I realized Granola is super good at taking that and then making it coherent and making it into like a template that you can use. I used better dictation, so I don't have to type out all my commands. I could stream of consciousness, talk to whatever chatbot I'm using. And then from there, it's like I've been using Hunch, I've been using NAN, like whatever the kind of like integration tools. Lately, I've been trying Relay. I know you had Jacob on your podcast previously. That was a great listen. I've been really impressed with his product. So it's like, it's not super efficient right now because I have different workflows spread across like Hunch, NAN, and Relay, but really excited about this space of stringing together automations. And just to be concrete, like one of the first automations I ever built on Hunch was like when someone like books a meeting with me, you automatically like scrape their landing page, you pull information from their profile, and it'll email me like a quick brief I can go over. And then you'll also have Claude look at it, and I'll have it be like, hey, imagine you are like the world's best kind of like B2B sales consultant. What are things or key pieces of information you would absolutely need to know from this person in order to help them succeed at go-to-market or sales, etc. And just getting that kind of 30-second summary that I can then start doing more further research on the client. Super, super helpful. So that's like an example.
Yeah. So the idea is that you get that email like maybe an hour before the call or maybe a couple of days. Then you fill in the gaps. So then you feel like very prepared when you jump into the call with that person.
Yeah. It's also just like a good like kind of notification too of like, okay, it's not just like, hey, you have this meeting, but like, okay, like time to make sure you're like prepared and you're maximizing the chance of being useful to that person.
Makes sense. Yeah. Any other kind of workflows that have been like a huge game changer in terms of saving time or?
Yeah, I guess for me, because like I'm in sales, like I think sales folks will tell you like updating CRM notes is like one of the most like annoying things ever. I really love Attio because they built from the ground up with the idea of integrating with a lot of these different tools. Yeah, saves me so much time. You'll have a meeting, you'll have meeting notes, and then not only do you have like stuff transcribed and summarize your meeting notes, but then it's like automatically updated in Attio. Because it's one of these kind of like tasks where you forget to do or it's annoying to do, so you never do it. And then when you do need the notes, you're like, where is it? And then you waste like 30 minutes. So even that simple integration, I think, has been super, super valuable.
Yeah. And do you use Atio for your own business, or is that, yeah?
Yeah, I use Atio for my own business, and I try not to be prescriptive with the founders I work with on CRMs unless they want me to be. In their cases, like, we'll allow them use HubSpot. A lot are using Atio actually, which makes things easier. But I try to meet them where they are in terms of building processes and workflows for them.
Makes sense. And between the chatbots and the workflows, like right now, which one do you still think you're getting more leverage out of? Is it still the models or?
Chatbots and the workflows stuff?
Yeah. Like which one of the two you think I'm still getting like maybe most leverage from this one or this other one? Or is it
That's
pretty
hard.
even right now?
Pretty even, because it's like, again, it's back to our point of like the workflow stuff. It executes it so quickly, and I don't have to like type in any commands, right? So I guess I'd say the workflow stuff has been high leverage in terms of saving time doing low value tasks. The chatbot stuff has been high leverage in terms of helping me think and be more clear and concise. So I guess they're both fairly high leverage, but high leverage in different ways.
Yeah. It's almost like the workflows are helping you free up time so then you can spend more time on the high leverage stuff. And then you're being able to do the high leverage stuff more efficiently by using the chatbots, basically.
Yeah, it's like kind of meta. I'm having AI bots free up more time for me to chat more with AI bots.
Which makes cool, right? It's like almost compounds on top of each other, right? Which I think, and by the way, I think that's what's going to happen with a lot of these like roles, like product, right? I think it's all about how can you use these tools to then do things that maybe were not the highest leverage use of your time to then maybe talk more to customers or put together like interesting strategies. And the last bucket you had was around like more like sales specific ones. We don't have to go super deep into those, since I know probably like our audience is going to be like, I don't use any of those. But maybe we can go like, hey, what trends are you seeing? And like, what are these tools really moving the needle? And maybe what are some functionality that's cool, but maybe it's not really that useful right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks I think Clay is a super popular one. I also use another tool called Persona, which is almost exactly like Clay, except they're like slightly cheaper. In terms of trends,
why do people love Clay so much? Because I know like basically what Clay, like from my understanding, what Clay is, it just basically allows you to do like data enrichment on like leads or accounts, right? But I know, for example, like Apollo, like you have a lot of the information already. So like what makes Clay so unique and so loved?
I think Clay's unique in that because it integrates with so many tools and data sources. Like Apollo is one source and you're trusting that to have the most up-to-date information. And oftentimes it doesn't because it's scraping from LinkedIn. Whereas Clay can pull from Apollo, it can pull from all these other sources into one thing. And I think it's interesting, like I was like an early user of Clay, and it's interesting how their messaging and positioning has evolved. And so I think I remember in the early days, they were really focused on specific use cases. Hey, we will find you emails, we will do this, etc. But I think how they talk about it now is they call it much more of like an orchestration layer. So it's, hey, here's this central hub that you can then pull in like whatever you need to find information quickly about a large number of companies and prospects. And for me, I think there's a bit of a learning curve, right? But I think for me, what's been really powerful with like Clay and Persona, especially if you're technical, is the fact that you can make API. They have a really nice UI for you to create like API calls to populate your quote unquote like spreadsheet, which is essentially what Clay is, right? It's like a really powerful spreadsheet that you can make various API calls on. And once you learn how to do that, then there's a lot of flexibility, not just like, hey, it's not just find me this email or find me this most recent LinkedIn post, but it's like, hey, built this thing in like NAN that can take a website and generate like interesting questions for me to ask. Let's hook that up into Clay. So that's one workflow instead of me switching around tools. But yeah, I think that's why a lot of sales folks like Clay, because before you'd have to, no one in their right minds would sign up for 8 different email service providers and be like, I have Marc, let me double check on 8 different service providers. This is the actual email. Whereas on Clay, you could do it in one click. So I think Clay did a great job of taking all these different workflows and use cases that you used to have to do and putting it all in one place. And they've also done the classic organic growth playbook of creating a lot of templates and having people evangelize their templates. So you could pull in other people's like automations as like building blocks and then build on top of them.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then one other tool that's not necessarily related to prospecting that I use all the time is it's Prompt Layer. It's like a really cheap, really powerful tool to keep track of what you're prompting, how those prompts, quote unquote, perform in terms of cost and parameters you give it. Because sometimes you need to tweak prompts, sometimes things hallucinate. And it's a really great way to keep track of different iterations of your prompts and how different tweaks led to different outputs. And what I like about Prompt Layer is you could set, here's what a good output looks like, here's what a bad output looks like, and then it could help score how your prompts are improving over time as you iterate on them based on those outputs.
So it almost sounds like an evaluation framework type of thing. Yeah. And does that work for chat interfaces, or is it mainly when you're calling the OpenAI APIs or Anthropic APIs?
I use Prompt Layer primarily for API calls to the different LLMs, just because once you're at scale, those can get pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Obviously you can get rate limited with the chatbots, but there's real costs associated when you're using the APIs. So I like having that layer just to keep track of what is our ROI for some of these prompts we're using.
Yeah. Do you know if that prompt layer works for the chat interfaces? Is that because I think that's something that I always wonder of how can I do evals in the chat interface? Because
it might because you can select what is the underlying model. So if you know the underlying model, if you know the system context, and then you know the output, then it could essentially do the same thing.
Yeah. So basically you can connect the APIs, test the prompts, and then if you just want to use the chatbot, you can just use it. If you want to change it, go back to prompt layer. Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I haven't used it, but I'm excited to check it out.
Would recommend it.
Phil, this has been a lot of fun. I think it's time to start wrapping up. 2 final questions for you.
Yeah.
One is, where can people find more about what you're doing with Blossomer?
Yeah.
And then 2, how can the audience be helpful to you?
Yeah, you could definitely find me on LinkedIn. Definitely add me on LinkedIn. You could go on Blossomer's website, blossomer.io. In terms of how my audience can be helpful to me, my audience can be helpful to me by letting me know how I can be helpful to them. So I work with a lot of early stage founders, pre-seed, seed, Series A, particularly folks who aren't yet ready to hire a full-time sales team, but need to think about go-to-market and making it predictable and systematized. If anything of what I've said, what I've posted, what I talk about resonates with you, and you have an inkling I might be fun or cool to work with, please reach out. And if not, reach out anyways. I just love meeting awesome founders, awesome product leaders in general.
Amazing. And I want to double click. People follow Phil on LinkedIn. A lot of the tools that I'm using is because I read a post from him that was like, hey, here's a workflow that I'm using. So he's a great follow. So I highly recommend.
Awesome.
Amazing. Phil, thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun.
No, thank you, Marc.